I always assumed the first betrayal would come from a stranger. A scam artist. A distant relative trying to worm their way into my will. But I was wrong. It came from my daughter's voice, muffled but clear, floating through the half-open window while I watered my petunias. "She's still sharp enough to sign things for now," Jordan said. "But if we wait too long, we'll lose our shot at the house." I froze. The sun was warm on my back. My hands were damp from the hose. But inside me, something went cold. Frozen, hollow. My daughter. My only child. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Her fiancé, Brian, said something I couldn't catch. Then her voice again, this time clipped, businesslike. "She still thinks I care about those damn piano lessons and Sunday dinners. But we need the property transferred before the diagnosis gets out. A memory slip here and there, it's perfect. Makes our case stronger." I dropped the hose. The water kept running, a thin hiss against the soil, but I couldn't hear it anymore. I stepped away from the garden, away from the window, away from the life I had built around the illusion of love. For 71 years, I'd been many things: wife, widow, mother, music teacher, caregiver. I had survived loss, isolation, arthritis, and more casseroles than I cared to count. But I had never once thought I'd have to survive my own daughter. The house behind me didn't look sinister. It was soft yellow with white trim and deep blue shutters, painted the same colors I chose with my late husband, Paul, the year after Jordan was born. He said it made the house feel like a lullaby. Now it felt like a stage, a set for betrayal. I walked inside quietly. My hand trembled as I turned the doorknob. I made sure to smile as I passed Jordan in the hallway, phone now tucked away, a faux pleasant brightness in her voice as she asked, "Mom, you want me to heat up the rest of the stew?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "I'm not feeling well." She nodded and turned back toward the living room. I watched her go. The sway of her shoulder, the confidence in her posture. She didn't suspect a thing. I went to my bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My mind raced. That conversation, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress talking. It was a plan. My daughter had laid out a plan to take everything I had left. Not after I was gone. Now. I stared at the painting above my dresser. A watercolor of a meadow Jordan made when she was 8. I had it framed. Her signature, J. Hartley, age 8, was still visible in the corner, done in purple crayon. I remembered the way she smiled when I hung it. "You like it that much?" she asked, her cheeks pink. "I love it," I had said. And I had meant it. Now I wondered if she even remembered painting it. I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out the black notebook I kept for grocery lists and appointment reminders. I turned to a blank page and began to write. Friday, 3:17 p.m. Jordan discussing house transfer with Brian. Said I'm sharp enough to sign for now. I didn't stop there. I wrote down everything I could recall, word for word. Every detail. Every shift in tone. Every phrase that confirmed the betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. When I was done, I flipped back through the notebook. Grocery lists. Recipes. Paul's medication schedule from years ago. Now this. I closed the book and stared at the ceiling. A quiet thought settled in my chest like dust on old piano keys. They think I'm fading. Let them. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the house settle around me. Pipes groaned softly. The wind nudged the shutters. Somewhere downstairs, the clock ticked like a countdown. In the early hours, just before dawn, I rose. I padded barefoot to the study, the one Paul had used as his den. His scent was long gone, but his energy remained in the old oak desk and the faded plaid chair he loved. I pulled open the bottom drawer and reached behind the hanging files until my fingers found the envelope. Yellowed thick. Sealed with a single piece of aging Scotch tape. I peeled it open carefully. Inside, the original deed, the 1998 update after our refinance, and, most importantly, a letter from Paul. Linda, if anything ever happens to me, don't let anyone pressure you. This house is yours until you decide otherwise. Don't let them talk you out of your own story. Love, Paul. I held it in shaking hands. They wouldn't get this house. Not without a fight. They wanted to play legal games? I would remind them who taught Jordan how to read contracts. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her name was Anita, a former student, now an estate attorney downtown. She picked up after the third ring. "Mrs. Hartley," she said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Anita, I need to talk to you about my house. And I don't want my daughter to know." Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. Anita met me at a quiet coffee shop near her office. She was in her early 40s now, but I still remembered the girl who once played a tearful rendition of Moonlight Sonata at her recital, hands trembling with stage fright. Her hands weren't trembling now. They were confident, steady, sharp as the tailored lines of her navy blazer. We sat at a corner table, away from the window, shielded from passers-by and, more importantly, from ears that didn't belong in this conversation. "You came alone?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Jordan doesn't know I'm here, and I'd like to keep it that way." Anita opened her briefcase and pulled out a pad of legal paper. "Tell me everything." I told her about the conversation I overheard. The way Jordan had referred to my mental capacity like it was an asset waiting to depreciate. How she and her fiancé were timing their move based on how soon they thought I'd slip. I told her about the envelope I'd found in Paul's desk. About the letter. The deed. Anita's expression remained calm, but I saw it, the flicker of concern in her eyes. Not pity. No, Anita had always respected strength. And she saw that I wasn't here to ask for rescue. I was here to fight. "This happens more often than people think," she said after I finished. "Caretaker fraud. Inheritance coercion. They assume age means malleability. They're about to find out how firm I still am," I said. She smiled, small, approving. "I'm glad you still have the original deed and documentation. That'll be critical. And the letter from your husband, while not legally binding, is strong narrative support. Juries respond to intent, especially when it's written in a dead man's hand." I nodded. "Can we protect the house?" "Yes," she said. "We'll start by drafting a transfer into a living trust with you as the primary trustee and a successor of your choice. That way, even if Jordan tries anything with power of attorney or guardianship filings, she won't be able to touch the deed." I hesitated. "What about naming her as the successor trustee?" Anita paused. "I'd advise against that, given what you've told me. Do you have anyone else you trust?" I closed my eyes for a moment and saw her face. "Carla," I said. "She's been cleaning the house every other Tuesday for 12 years. Never asks questions. Always shows up. When Paul passed, she brought soup without being asked." Anita wrote the name down. "We'll need her full legal information. I'll run background, just as protocol. But a longtime employee with no financial motive is a solid choice." "Thank you," I said. My voice cracked. Anita reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "You're not alone in this," she said. "And you're not crazy." Those last words held more weight than I expected, because part of me had started to wonder. Not about the betrayal, I knew what I heard, but about my right to fight it, to reclaim power. I had raised Jordan after all, taught her to tie her shoes, wipe her tears, study for her LSATs. And now she was leveraging my forgetfulness like a chess piece. Well, checkmate isn't called until the last move. When I got home, the front gate creaked louder than usual. It always did after the rain. Paul used to fix it every fall. I made a note to call the handyman. As I walked up the path, I saw Carla's car already parked by the curb, right on time. She was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, humming a song I didn't recognize. She paused when she saw me. "Good morning, Miss Linda," she said with that warm smile of hers. "Carla," I said, "do you have a minute?" She immediately shut off the water, dried her hands, and joined me at the kitchen table. I explained everything, slowly, carefully, watching her face for any shift. But she didn't flinch. Not once. When I said, I want you to be the successor trustee of the house, she blinked. Me? I know it's unusual, I said. And I know you didn't ask for this. But I need someone who understands this place, who won't see it as a transaction. Tears welled in her eyes. Miss Linda, she said softly, that's the kindest thing anyone's ever trusted me with. I'd be honored. I nodded, swallowing hard. I'll need your information for my attorney. She placed her hand over mine. Anything you need. Always. That afternoon, I dug out every important document from the safe. Titles, letters, financial statements. I made labeled copies, just as Anita instructed, and tucked them into a new binder marked in bold ink. Hartley House, Protected Trust. It felt ceremonial. The first lock clicked. That evening, Jordan stopped by unannounced. Again. She walked in with her usual bright tone. Hi, Mom. I brought over that Thai soup you like. I smiled politely. Thanks, Jordan. That's thoughtful. She moved around the house like it was already hers. Straightened picture frames, adjusted pillows. She picked up the mail off the table and thumbed through it as if she were filtering it for me. Got your utility bill here, she said. You know, you really should switch to online statements. Easier to track. I didn't respond. She glanced at me. You okay, Mom? You seem quiet. I'm fine, I said. A beat. Oh, she said, suddenly remembering. Brian and I were thinking maybe we could take you on a little weekend trip to the coast. Just the three of us. You could use the break. My heart squeezed. A weekend trip. Displacement masked as generosity. Thank you, I said softly. But I'm good here. This house is still home. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. A flicker. Well, she said, the offer stands. I nodded. She didn't know what I had done yet, but she would. Soon. 2 days later, I found the envelope waiting for me on the kitchen table. It was ivory, heavy stock, the kind you use for wedding invitations or high-end legal notices. No return address. Just my name in Jordan's script. Neat, careful, and far too confident. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen, hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter, staring at it like it might open itself and confess. Carla had just left for the day. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I sat down, the chair creaking beneath me. My knees ached in the way they always did when a storm was coming. Paul used to joke that I was more accurate than the weather app. I slit the envelope open with a butter knife. Inside, a glossy brochure for a luxury senior living community. Windermere Grove, where independence meets comfort. Smiling faces, rolling green lawns, yoga mats on decks, group painting classes. The kind of staged joy that tried to disguise abandonment as lifestyle. And beneath it, a typed letter. Mom, I know you've been feeling overwhelmed lately, and I just want what's best for you. Brian and I toured Windermere last week. It's beautiful, calm, full of amenities, and I think you'd really thrive there. The staff is warm. They have a music room. Enclosed is a preliminary power of attorney form that we can fill out together. It's just a safeguard, nothing permanent. It'll make it easier for me to handle things on your behalf, so you can focus on enjoying life. Let's talk more over dinner? Love you always. Jordan. I stared at the words, power of attorney, like they were a stain. A permanent ink blot in the middle of a white tablecloth. She wanted me to sign control over to her. Quietly. Casually. Over dinner, as if it were dessert. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into the moleskine binder beneath a new entry. Wednesday. 11:23 a.m. Envelope from Jordan. Brochure for Windermere Grove. Pre-filled POA form enclosed. Then I stood and walked to the front door. Locked it. Every click of the deadbolt sounded like punctuation. That evening, I called Anita. Did you expect this? I asked. There was a pause on the line. Yes, she said finally. It's a standard play. First charm, then pressure, then paperwork. They always disguise it as protection. She says it's just temporary. Power of attorney is never just temporary once it's filed. What do I do with it? Nothing, Anita said. We're ahead. The trust is almost finalized. But this envelope, I'd like you to keep it as evidence. If she pushes this in court, we can show her intent. Intent. I used to think that word belonged to murderers and lawyers. Now I knew it belonged to daughters, too. The next day, I invited my neighbor Delilah over for tea. She was in her late 50s, vibrant, nosy in the way only someone who truly cares can be. She had lived 2 houses down for over 15 years. We shared birthdays, gossip, and grief when Paul passed. She brought peach pie to the funeral. Homemade. Crust like a cloud. I have a favor to ask, I told her after the second cup. Her eyes twinkled. You finally ready to let me fix that bird bath? I smiled. No. Something a bit heavier. She set her teacup down. Say the word. I took a deep breath. If anything ever happens, if Jordan says I'm losing it, or if she tries to get the neighbors involved, will you tell the truth? About me. That I'm still here. Still sharp. Delilah's brow furrowed. She said something to you? I hesitated, then nodded. She's planning something. I heard her. She's trying to take the house. Maybe more. Delilah sat back, arms folded. I always had a funny feeling about her fiancé. The one with the Rolex and the fake teeth. I let out a short laugh. That's him. You don't have to worry, Linda, she said. If she tries to paint you as confused, she's going to have a whole neighborhood to argue with. I hope it doesn't come to that. But if it does, Delilah said, eyes steady, we've got you. That night, I baked Paul's favorite cookies, walnut shortbread with a touch of lemon zest. I hadn't made them in years. The smell filled the house, warm and buttery, tinged with memory. As I placed the tray on the cooling rack, I heard the creak of the gate outside. Jordan. She walked in moments later, the same familiar knock-knock followed by, Mom, it's me. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and met her in the hallway. She was all smiles, dressed too nicely for a casual visit. Her perfume trailed behind her like intention. Just thought I'd check in, she said. Everything okay? Fine, I said. You left something yesterday. Her face shifted ever so slightly. Oh, the envelope, I said, with the brochure and the legal form. She nodded, casual. Right. I figured it'd make things easier. Easier for who? I asked. Her smile dimmed. Mom, come on. It's just a precaution. I turned and walked into the kitchen, letting her follow. The cookies sat on the counter, golden brown. I handed her one. She took it automatically, more from reflex than appreciation. They're Paul's favorite, I said. Remember? She bit into it without answering. I won't be signing anything, I said, voice calm. She blinked. Mom. No, I interrupted. No pressure, no persuasion, no dinner table discussions. I'm of sound mind, and this house is not up for debate. She swallowed hard. You're misunderstanding. I'm not, I said. I'm just finally seeing clearly. The silence between us cracked open like a shell. You've been talking to someone, she said, cautious now. I've been listening, I replied. And now I'm documenting. She stood there for a long moment, the cookie untouched in her hand. I don't know what you think is happening. I know exactly what's happening, I said. And I want you to know something too. I reached into the drawer, pulled out the black notebook, and placed it gently on the table between us. This is my record. Everything you've said, everything you've sent. Dated. Filed. Ready. Her mouth parted, but no words came out. I smiled softly. Would you like some tea? After Jordan left that night, cookie uneaten, smile crumbled. I stood at the window and watched her car idle at the curb longer than it should have. Headlights on. Engine running. A silhouette frozen behind the wheel. She was calculating. Running the numbers in her head, I imagined timeline, pushback, probability of success. Not for my care. For the house. For the asset she thought I had grown too old to protect. I drew the curtain shut. The next morning, the air smelled like wood smoke and the first whisper of fall. I lit a cinnamon candle in the kitchen, brewed a pot of strong black tea, and took the moleskine notebook into the study. The old leather-bound book was growing thick. Evidence. Memory. Proof. I sat in Paul's old chair, the one with the faded corduroy arms and his outlines still pressed into the cushion, and stared at the file drawer I hadn't opened in years. Not fully. It was time. The drawer creaked on its runners as I slid it out. Files from decades ago. Medical paperwork. PDA rosters. Travel itineraries. Receipts for a life we once thought would last forever. I flipped past them slowly until I reached a folder I didn't recognize. Personal, LH scrawled across it in Paul's distinct, upright handwriting. I opened it. Inside were half a dozen sheets of paper, a typed letter, several notarized documents, and at the very back, a small, square envelope sealed with wax. Red wax, with the imprint of the music note charm I had once given him. My heart fluttered. I hadn't seen that seal in decades. First, the letter. Linda, if you're reading this, you're probably searching for something deeper than documents. That's good. You always had a gift for hearing what wasn't said aloud. I made arrangements years ago, quietly, in case things got complicated. You've always had a heart too generous for confrontation. If Jordan forgets who you are or who we were, these documents will remind her. Or the court. I set up a secondary trust, not tied to the main deed, through an old contact of mine in Portland. It only activates if triggered by outside legal challenges to your competence. Consider it a safeguard, a quiet second line of defense. Trust your instincts. They've never failed you. And remember, this house is more than wood and stone. It's your voice. Don't let them silence it. Love, Paul. I read it 3 times. The words pulsed in my chest like a heartbeat I hadn't felt in years. Paul had known. Maybe not exactly what would happen, but that something could. And he had trusted me enough to handle it. But more than that, he had planned for the day I might need help without asking for it. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Quiet ones. The kind you don't wipe away right away. Then I turned to the sealed envelope. Inside, a notarized certificate, the Hartley Contingency Trust. It named me as primary holder and trustee, with automatic revocation clauses tied to any document signed under pressure or misrepresentation, especially power of attorney claims. Dated June 14, 2006. Under it was a separate one-page contract signed by Paul and a woman named Margot Weller. ESQ, it was simple, efficient, and unmistakably binding. The house wasn't just protected. It was fortified. And Jordan had no idea. Later that day, I called Anita. I need you to look into a Portland-based lawyer named Margot Weller, I said. I found something Paul set up years ago. A trust. Separate from the main one. Anita sounded intrigued. That's rare. Send me scans of what you found. I'll verify it. I did. 3 hours later, she called back. Her voice was tinged with something new, something like respect. This trust is real, Linda. Legitimate, tightly written, and Paul was smart. It activates automatically under any attempt to file POA or legal guardianship without your consent. It overrides default state probate laws and funnels decision-making authority back to you. It even flags for court review if you're moved from the property under duress. I exhaled, the air shaking as it left me. So Jordan can't touch the house? She can't even get within a whisper of it without triggering red flags, Anita said. You have more protection than most judges I know. A smile spread across my face. Small. Quiet. Steady. Thank you, I whispered, not just to Anita, but to Paul. The next few days, I moved through my home with a kind of sacred calm. Every hallway felt taller. Every floorboard, a drumbeat of resistance. I didn't tell Jordan. Not yet. Let her think her plan was still in motion. Let her lay the final brick in the trap she thought she'd set for me. Instead, I focused on reinforcement. I had the locks changed, not the front ones, but the interior ones. I added a coded keypad to Paul's study. Carla had her own entry code. So did Delilah. But not Jordan. I scheduled a check-in with Dr. Singh, my primary care physician. During the visit, I asked him, clearly and formally, to evaluate my cognitive health and sign an affidavit affirming I was of sound mind. He did, gladly. I don't know what's going on, he said, peering over his glasses, but I can tell this isn't just for peace of mind. It's for preservation, I said. And then I had Carla snap a photo of me holding the affidavit with that day's newspaper.
Dramatic?
Maybe. But I wasn't going to war with assumptions. I was documenting everything. That Friday, Jordan texted, "Dinner Sunday? I have something exciting to discuss."
Just you, me, and Brian.
I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Of course.
I'll make pot roast.
Let her come. Let her try. Because I had a folder of my own now. And this time, the table would be mine. The roast was already in the oven by noon. Potatoes, carrots, rosemary, and enough garlic to perfume the air for hours. Paul used to say, "The smell of real food keeps people honest." I wasn't cooking for nostalgia. I was setting a stage. By 4 p.m., the table was set. White linen runner, polished silverware, the good china with the blue rim. I hadn't used that set in years, not since Harper's second birthday. Tonight, it wasn't about appearance. It was about memory, anchoring, making sure no one at that table could pretend they hadn't been raised on love and sacrifice. I laid one of Paul's old fountain pens next to a thick, unlabeled manila folder at my seat. A message, without words. At 6:01, I heard the gravel crunch in the driveway. They were prompt. Of course they were. Jordan stepped in first, her dress more business casual than dinner-friendly. Behind her, Brian carried a laptop bag. I noted that before I even said hello. "Smells amazing," she said, air kissing my cheek. "Hope you're hungry," I said, my voice steady. I made Paul's favorite. Brian nodded, trying to look relaxed, but his eyes darted to the folder on the table. His fingers twitched toward the bag at his side like it was a holster. We sat down. I served. No one spoke much during the first few bites. The air between us buzzed with what wasn't being said. Jordan finally broke the silence. "This is really delicious, Mom." I smiled. "Thank you." Another beat. "I know you're wondering why we wanted to come," she said, setting her fork down. "And I want you to know, this isn't an ambush." Brian reached into his bag and pulled out a stack of neatly collated documents, placing them gently, too gently, on the table like a peace offering. "This," Jordan continued, "is a revised care plan. Something Brian and I have been working on. It's not legal. Not yet. Just a suggestion. We've even left out the power of attorney for now, to show good faith." I didn't move. She went on. "We want you to feel safe, Mom. Not just now, but for the years ahead. Windermere has 24/7 support, a private unit, and you'd still have full autonomy over your finances and decisions. We'd just help with the logistics." Logistics. Such a neat little word for removal. "And the house?" I asked calmly. Jordan blinked. "Well, it would eventually be listed. The upkeep is too much for one person. But the money would go into a trust for your care. It's all written out in here." She slid the packet across the table. I didn't touch it. Instead, I picked up the manila folder beside me and opened it slowly. "I'd like to show you something too," I said. I pulled out the notarized Hartley Contingency Trust, the affidavit from Dr. Singh, a printed copy of Jordan's POA attempt with a handwritten sticky note, and a time-stamped photo of me holding the affidavit next to that day's newspaper. Jordan's face lost its brightness by degrees. "I don't understand," she said, reaching for the papers. "I do," I replied. "That's the difference." Brian stiffened, scanning the documents. This is extensive." "Yes, it is," I said. "Because what you presented here tonight, it isn't care. It's strategy. It's acquisition disguised as compassion. And I'm not giving you the keys to my life, so you can sell it for convenience." Jordan opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, no rehearsed speech. I pulled out the final paper. Paul's letter. I slid it across to her. She read the first few lines before her shoulders slumped. "You knew," she whispered. "All along." "I heard you," I said. "Through the window. You and Brian plotting. Timing your moves based on when you thought I'd start forgetting things." Brian sat forward, palms raised. It was just a conversation. It was a blueprint. I cut in. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. Jordan's voice came out small. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you were willing to erase me, I said. To turn my home into a bullet point on a spreadsheet. She reached for the document again, this time more slowly. Mom, is this all legally binding? It is, I said. And it's done. The house is protected. The trust is irrevocable. You are not the trustee. You are not the beneficiary. You don't even have the right to negotiate. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. So, what happens now? She asked. That's up to you, I said. You can keep pushing, keep lawyering up, and I'll meet you in court with 20 years of receipts. Or what? Or you can stop trying to win a house and start earning your place in my life again. The words hovered in the air. She looked down at her plate. Brian stared at the documents like they might explode. Then she whispered, You don't trust me anymore. I leaned in slightly.
No, Jordan.
I trusted you for too long. Brian stood. We should go. Jordan didn't move. She looked at the roast, the empty wine glasses, the picture of Paul on the mantel. I forgot what this house meant, she said quietly. It was never about the square footage. No, I replied. It was about the history. The Sunday mornings. The thunderstorms. The time you broke your wrist and I slept in a chair beside your bed for a week. Tears finally fell. Brian touched her shoulder. Jordan. She stood, wiped her face. But before she left, she turned back. Is it too late to fix it? She asked. I looked at her for a long moment. She looked so much like me when I was her age. And so much like a stranger. It's not too late, I said. But it's no longer automatic. After they left, I washed the dishes slowly. No music. Just the clink of ceramic and the steady thrum of water. Then I placed Paul's letter back in the folder, shut off the kitchen light, and locked the door. The house exhaled around me. Solid. Safe. And still mine. The days after the confrontation passed like fog, dense, quiet, impossible to fully grasp. I didn't hear from Jordan. No texts. No calls. Not even one of her passive, just checking in voicemails. But on Thursday morning, I heard a knock at the door. Not the chirpy, Mom, it's me, knock Jordan used. This one was softer. Hesitant. I opened it to find a face I hadn't seen in weeks. Harper. Her arms were wrapped around a stack of construction paper and a shoebox decorated in glitter and misspelled words. Hi, Grandma, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Behind her, at the bottom of the porch steps, stood Jordan. She didn't come any closer. Just gave a small wave, eyes tired, face makeup-free. I told her I'd stay in the car, she said. She asked to come alone. I looked at Harper. Is that true? Harper nodded. I stepped aside. Then come in, sweetheart. She crossed the threshold like it was sacred ground. And maybe to both of us it was. We sat on the couch together, the shoebox between us. Harper lifted the lid slowly and pulled out what looked like a school project. A diorama of a house. My house, actually. Blue shutters, yellow siding, even the gardenias Paul planted in '94. Crafted from paper, glue, and love. I had to make a place I feel safe project, she explained. I picked here. My throat tightened. I know Mommy says we might not come here a lot anymore, she continued. But I wanted you to know. I remember. She handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a letter, written in purple gel pen, her signature at the bottom surrounded by hand-drawn stars. Dear Grandma, sometimes people forget things that matter. Like how your house smells like cookies. Or how you always put a blanket on me when I fall asleep. Or how the piano in the corner makes sad sounds that don't feel so sad when you play them. Mommy says grown-ups make hard choices. But I think maybe she made a wrong one. I hope she says sorry. I think she will. But even if she doesn't yet, I still wanted you to know this house is my favorite place in the whole world. Love. Harper. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. I'm not selling the house, I whispered. Harper smiled. I didn't think you would. We spent the next hour baking muffins, banana walnut, her favorite. She insisted on cracking the eggs herself, making a mess of the counter, and laughing every time one shell slipped between her fingers. When they were done and cooling on the rack, she asked, "Can I play the piano?" "Of course," I said. She climbed up onto the bench, her feet not yet touching the ground, and played a slow, shaky version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The keys were out of tune in the high notes. I'd have to call the tuner. But I let the notes linger in the air. They sounded like forgiveness. When it was time to leave, Harper hugged me tightly. "I left something in the kitchen for you," she whispered. After Jordan drove away, I walked back inside and found a sticky note on the fridge. In Harper's purple handwriting, "Don't let her take the cookies or the piano. They belong to your heart." I stood there for a long time, tears running freely. The next morning, I called Anita. "I want to amend the trust," I said. "To include Harper?" "No," I said. "Not yet. But I want to make space for her. A clause. Something that lets her choose to be part of it when she's old enough." Anita paused. "That's beautiful." "She's the only one who didn't ask for anything," I said. "Except to be remembered." That afternoon, I began clearing out Paul's study. Not to erase him, never that, but to make space. I took down the dusty calendar from 2011, shelved the books neither of us had read in years. I found 3 of his old flannel shirts and folded them gently into a box. At the back of the closet, behind the winter coats, I found the small cedar chest he used to keep locked. I hadn't opened it in over a decade. The key was still taped beneath the top drawer of his desk. Inside were old letters, photos, a pocket watch, and one faded Polaroid of me, holding baby Jordan on our front porch. Paul had scribbled on the back, 2 girls. My whole world. I held the photo for a long time. What had gone wrong? When had love been replaced with spreadsheets and property assessments? And could it ever be undone? That night, I made a simple dinner for myself, tomato soup and buttered toast. I ate in silence, the house soft around me. Then I lit a candle and sat at the piano. I played Clair de Lune. It had always been Paul's favorite. The notes fell like rainwater in the quiet. I closed my eyes and let them take me. It came on a Monday. Slipped through the mail slot with the rest of the day's offerings, an energy bill, a coupon flyer, and one stiff white envelope stamped with a law firm logo I didn't recognize. I stood at the kitchen counter, reading it in full, twice. Hartley Trust Reconsideration Filing. Filed on behalf of Ms. Jordan Hartley. Petition for evaluation of settler's mental capacity. Proposed review of transfer documentation for potential undue influence. My hand didn't shake. My chest didn't rise. I felt nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I had already grieved this version of my daughter. The one who would quietly send lawyers instead of openly speaking. The one who didn't knock on my door, but filed claims to kick it open. She hadn't changed her mind. She'd changed her tactic. The letter alleged concern. Alleged confusion. Alleged manipulation, specifically citing an individual named Carla with increasing influence over the settlers' decisions. They'd even named my housekeeper, my friend, and, worst of all, it came with a request for an emergency court hearing. I picked up the phone and called Anita. Her voice was crisp the moment she heard mine. "She filed, didn't she?" "Yes. I saw the docket notice an hour ago. I was just about to call you. It's desperate, Linda. They're trying to prove you didn't understand what you signed. That you were coerced." I figured. "Well, stop it," Anita said. "I've already drafted the response. You have your medical affidavit, timestamped documents, and every date-stamped note you've written. You're ready." I didn't hesitate. "Let's file it." But after I hung up, I didn't move right away. I stared at the piano. The quiet house. The photo Harper had drawn still taped to the fridge. The purple gel pen heart at the bottom. They were trying to erase all of it. And that's when something inside me ignited, not panic, not fear. Resolve. That afternoon, I picked up the phone again, this time to Carla. "I need a favor," I said. "Anything. I want you to come by this week. But not to clean. I want to tell you everything." On camera. She arrived the next morning with her usual tote bag and a bouquet of flowers from her backyard garden. I sat her down at the dining room table and turned on my phone's video recorder. I spoke plainly. I'm recording this in case it ends up in court. This is my voice. This is my mind. I am Linda Hartley. I am 71 years old. I do not suffer from dementia, Alzheimer's, or cognitive impairment. I signed the Hartley Trust willingly. No one manipulated me, especially not Carla. Carla blinked back tears, but said nothing. I turned the phone toward her. She didn't coerce me. I continued. She supported me. She saw me when my own daughter didn't. Carla spoke quietly. I never wanted the house, but I've loved it, and I've respected Miss Linda more than almost anyone in my life. I ended the recording, saved it, backed it up to 2 hard drives and an email folder Anita had set up for potential evidence. They could bring arguments. I'd bring truth. 2 days later, Harper came to visit again. This time after school, a small backpack still slung over one shoulder. She brought a card she'd made in class. A drawing of me in front of the house, holding cookies, and her beside me with a giant grin. On the back, it said in crooked cursive, "Home is a person, not a place. But you made it both." I hugged her tightly. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Mommy said some lawyers were going to call you." She did. Harper nodded. She said sometimes adults fight in paperwork instead of words. That's true, I said. But words still matter. Harper was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made me freeze. "I found Mommy crying last night." I looked down at her. "Did she tell you why?" She said she didn't know how to stop wanting everything, even when it broke things. I felt the breath catch in my throat. She said she thought if she could just fix it, she'd feel loved again. And just like that, the courtroom shrank away for a second. The law didn't matter. The paperwork, the filings, all of it dissolved into the single truth I had almost forgotten. Jordan was still grieving too. Not just Paul's death, not just the passage of time, but her own fading identity. Somewhere along the way, she had replaced love with control, replaced safety with ownership, replaced home with asset. But deep down, she hadn't stopped wanting to be loved. She just didn't know how to come back without asking for everything. That night, I pulled out a new page in the Moleskine notebook. Entry, pre-hearing. Jordan has filed a formal challenge. They are alleging manipulation and mental decline. I am ready, but I will not enter that courtroom bitter. I will enter with evidence. And mercy. Because Harper was right. Home is a person. And I would not become a courtroom exhibit. I would be the narrator of my own legacy. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and polished wood. Cold air hummed from unseen vents, but I wasn't cold. Not anymore. Anita met me at the entrance, dressed in slate gray and conviction. She carried 2 leather binders, one filled with evidence, and the other filled with something stronger, truth. "You ready?" she asked, scanning my face. I nodded. More than I've ever been. We walked in together. The room was small, just a probate hearing chamber, not a jury trial. But it felt like a theater, and everyone was already in costume. Brian sat behind the petitioner's table in a sleek blue suit, checking his phone like he was bored. Jordan sat beside him, her expression carefully arranged, concerned daughter with a touch of sorrow. But I could see it just behind the performance, a flicker of calculation in her eyes. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to win. The judge, a woman with silver hair and no tolerance for nonsense, glanced over the schedule. "Miss Hartley," she said, eyes on Jordan. "You're requesting a review of the trust designation and asset transfer based on concerns of cognitive impairment and undue influence. Correct?" Jordan stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My mother has been showing signs of forgetfulness. She has become isolated, and there's been an increase in control exerted by a non-family member named Carla. I believe the transfer of her home into a private trust may not have been entirely voluntary." The judge looked unimpressed. "Do you have medical documentation to support this?" Jordan hesitated. "We have anecdotal reports." Brian jumped in smoothly. Testimonies from family and neighbors who've seen a decline. We request a formal evaluation. The judge raised an eyebrow. And did your mother agree to that? No, Jordan said quickly. But we're asking for it to ensure she's safe. Anita stood next.
Calm, quiet, precise.
Your Honor, my client is not only present, but fully competent. She has a notarized medical affidavit from her physician, a complete video testimony, and an extensive written record of interactions, including multiple documented attempts by Ms. Hartley to solicit her signature on a power of attorney under misleading pretenses. The judge adjusted her glasses. And your client is here to testify? I am, I said, rising to my feet. I walked to the stand slowly, not because I was weak, but because I wanted every step to mean something. The clerk swore me in. I looked the judge in the eye. My name is Linda Hartley. I'm 71. I'm a retired music teacher. I pay my own bills. I cook my own meals. And I know exactly what's happening today. The judge nodded. Go on, Mrs. Hartley. I took a deep breath. My daughter believes that because I am aging, I must be fading. That forgetfulness is the same as incapacity. That solitude is the same as isolation. But I assure you, I am of sound mind. What I am not is naive. I reached into my bag and placed 3 things on the table. The signed affidavit from Dr. Singh, a printed transcript of the voicemail Jordan had accidentally left, discussing getting the house signed over before it's too late. A USB drive with my recorded statement and Carla's testimony. These, I said, are the receipts of my clarity. The judge skimmed the affidavit. She didn't ask to play the video. She didn't need to. Ms. Hartley, the judge said, turning to Jordan, did you or your fiancé ever attempt to file paperwork on your mother's behalf without her full knowledge or consent? Jordan stood. Only because I believed she was vulnerable. Belief is not proof, the judge said sharply. Then something happened I didn't expect. Harper walked in. I heard the door creak and turned to see her, holding Delilah's hand. She wasn't supposed to be here. Delilah gave me a small nod from the back bench. She asked to come, she whispered. She said she had something to say. The judge looked up. Is this your granddaughter, Mrs. Hartley? I stood. Yes. Does she have a statement? Harper looked at me for permission. I nodded. She walked to the front, her little shoes clicking like defiance on the tile. I just want to say something, she said. My grandma remembers everything. She remembers that I don't like raisins. She remembers the song I played at my recital. She remembers that I cried when Mommy forgot to pick me up. Jordan's face paled. She remembers love, Harper continued, even when people try to trade it for paperwork. The room went still. The judge leaned back. Well, she said after a pause, unless there's further evidence to present, I believe I have enough to make a decision. Brian stood, whispering frantically to Jordan. She shook her head. Her face was unreadable now. The judge looked directly at her. Ms. Hartley, this court finds no evidence of cognitive decline, nor any indication of undue influence.
The trust stands.
The property remains under Linda Hartley's full control. This matter is closed. The gavel struck would like thunder. It was done. Outside, the wind picked up. The sky was the color of steel and possibility. Harper ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Did I do good? You did everything right, I whispered. Jordan stepped forward. For once, she looked stripped bare. No gloss. No lines rehearsed in front of a mirror. I didn't think you'd fight this hard, she said. I didn't think you'd try to take everything from me, I replied. She swallowed. I thought if I lost the house, I'd lose my place. I looked at her evenly. You lost it when you stopped seeing me as your mother, not your opponent. She nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Is there any way back from this? She asked. Maybe, I said, but not through courtrooms. She didn't press further. And for the first time in months, I felt the space between us begin to shift. Not toward trust, but toward truth. And that was enough for now. The morning after court felt different than I imagined. There was no victory parade, No dramatic champagne toast. Just the slow, steady hum of the heater warming the kitchen, the smell of toast, and the soft creak of my house settling into itself like it always had. But this time, it felt like it was settling with me, not on me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like a tree after a storm, roots still deep, branches scarred but standing. The trust was secure. My name unchallenged. Carla, safe from accusation. Harper, still mine.
And Jordan?
She was quieter now. She hadn't called. But she hadn't filed another motion either. That silence used to terrify me. Now, it just meant space. And space was something we both needed. That afternoon, I made soup. Real soup. Chicken with rosemary and pearl onions, and the little noodles Harper liked. I packed half of it in a container and walked it next door. Delilah opened the door before I could knock. "I heard," she said, pulling me into a hug. "About Harper. About court. About everything." She came into that courtroom like a truth bomb, I said. Delilah grinned. "Of course she did. She's your granddaughter." We sat at her kitchen table and shared soup, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed, really laughed. The kind that leaves your cheeks sore and your ribs light. I told her about the judge. About Jordan's face when Harper took the stand. About how Carla cried when the ruling was announced and hugged me like she was holding up the roof. "She's a good woman," Delilah said. "And she never once looked like she wanted anything more than your peace." I nodded. That's exactly why she's still here. The next day, I sat down at the piano and played something I hadn't touched in years, "The Way You Look Tonight."
Paul's favorite.
As the melody filled the living room, the doorbell rang. I paused mid-note. It was Jordan. She stood on the porch holding a paper bag and a white envelope. No makeup. No forced cheer. Just her. "I brought you coffee," she said, holding out the bag like a peace offering. "Decaf." She smiled. "You still think I don't listen." I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit at the dining table or look around the house like she used to, as if mentally cataloging what would be sold first. She sat on the couch like she didn't own it and for once didn't want to. I poured her a cup and joined her in the quiet. "I didn't come to talk about the house," she said. "That's good," I replied. She took a breath. "I've been seeing someone. A therapist. I started a few weeks ago." That surprised me, but I didn't react. I let her say it. She asked me why I kept trying to control everything. And the truth is, I thought if I could just organize your life, I'd feel less like mine was falling apart. "That's not love," I said gently. "I know," she whispered. We sat in that stillness for a while. Then she handed me the envelope. I opened it and found a letter. No legal stamp. No request. Just words.
Mom.
"I don't want the house. I don't want the trust. I just want to start again. I know that's not something I've earned, but I'm willing to. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand why I treated you like a liability instead of a legacy. But I see it now. I see you now. Please let me earn my way back.
Love."
Jordan." My fingers trembled slightly. Not from weakness, but because I could feel something shift. Something I didn't dare name yet. But I knew it wasn't the end. Later that evening, I wrote my own letter. Not to Jordan. To Harper. "Dear Harper, when you're older, you'll hear this story told in whispers. Some people will say it was about a house. Some will say it was about paperwork. But I hope you remember that it was about people. About seeing each other. About telling the truth, even when it hurts. You reminded me who I am when I was starting to disappear. This house is yours to love, not to inherit, but to carry in your bones. And when it's your turn, you'll know what to do. Love always."
Grandma.
I folded the letter and placed it in the same moleskine that now held affidavits, sticky notes, court orders, and memories. It wasn't just a notebook anymore. It was a living will. Not for lawyers. For legacy. The first snow fell on a quiet Sunday morning. Thin flakes, lazy and scattered, danced down over the roof, and trees like the house was being gently dusted by time. I stood at the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching the world soften outside. It had been 3 weeks since the court hearing. 3 weeks since Jordan stopped fighting me in court and started learning how to show up differently. There had been no grand declarations, no dramatic apologies on bended knee. But she'd begun calling every Sunday, dropping off Harper for piano lessons, bringing fresh bread from the market, and staying just long enough to ask genuinely, "How are you, Mom?" And I'd begun answering honestly. Progress, not perfection. The trust still stood, legally sealed. Carla still served as successor trustee, her name solid on the deed like an anchor. But something inside me had shifted. This was no longer about guarding what was mine. It was about deciding what to give. Harper came over that afternoon, bundled in a pink coat and carrying a plastic tub of gingerbread cookies she and Jordan had made together. "Mom didn't burn them this time," she beamed. "She must have had help," I teased. Harper giggled and ran straight for the piano. I followed, watching her fingers stumble over Silent Night, with just enough hesitation to make it beautiful. When she finished, I clapped softly. "You know," I said, "when I'm gone one day, I think you're the one who'll keep this music alive." She looked up. "But you're not going anywhere soon, right?" "Not for a while," I smiled. "But I want you to know where everything is when the time comes." "Everything?" I knelt beside her. "In my study, there's a black notebook. It has letters, pictures, even a few secrets." Harper grinned. "Like what?" "Like which neighbor borrowed my pie dish in 2012 and never gave it back." She gasped. "Scandalous." "And it also has a letter for you." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really? But you're not allowed to read it until you're at least 18. "Deal," she said solemnly, pinky swearing with me before dashing off to find Carla and tell her the pie dish bandit had been unmasked. That night, I opened the Moleskine one last time. I added a new page. Not a complaint. Not a legal note. Not a log of betrayal or proof of sanity. Just a sentence. This home was once nearly taken. Now it has been given. To love. To memory. To a future no longer written in fear. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked out onto the front porch, wrapped in Paul's old flannel, and sat on the swing. The wood creaked under me, but it held. The stars were faint through the clouds, but they were there. And as I rocked gently in the winter air, I heard the front door open behind me. It was Jordan. She stepped out holding 2 mugs. One for her, one for me. She sat beside me in silence, just like her father used to. The same weight in the air, the same stillness between words that meant more than speaking ever could. After a while, she asked, "Do you ever think about selling?" I turned to her. "The house?" She nodded. I sipped my tea. "No." She looked out at the street. "I don't anymore either." Then, softly, "I understand now." We rocked for a few more minutes before I said, "It was never just a house." She nodded. "I know. It was you." The days that followed were slow and kind. Carla started teaching Harper how to cook Sunday dinners, recipes passed down from Paul's side of the family that had never made it into books. I watched from the kitchen table, offering corrections and memories. Laughter returned to the corners of the house. Not loud, just honest. Delilah helped me organize a neighborhood gathering, a quiet winter potluck, no agenda except food and forgiveness. Even Jordan brought a tray of roasted vegetables no one believed she made herself, and everyone politely ignored the store-bought label at the bottom of the dish. We didn't talk about court. We talked about cardinals and the best way to keep plants alive in January and whether or not the new librarian looked like a young George Clooney. Normal things. Real things. On New Year's Eve, Harper asked if she could stay over. "Mom said I could if you weren't too tired." "Tired of you?" I smiled. "Never." She brought down a blanket, and we camped out in the living room, watching old movies and sipping hot cocoa. At midnight, fireworks cracked in the distance, muffled by distance and snowfall. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "You know," I said, "when you're older, you'll inherit something more than just furniture or stories." "What?" I looked around the room.
This.
"The couch." "No," I laughed. "This feeling." The one where you know you're safe. Where no one's trying to change you or take what's yours. She nodded, her eyes growing heavy. I want to give that to someone one day. You will, I whispered. That's what legacy really is. The next morning, I stood at the window, steam rising from my tea. The snow had melted slightly. The world was starting over. And so was I. Not as someone who almost lost everything, but as someone who chose deliberately, fiercely, quietly, to keep what mattered. My voice, my home,
My daughter.
and myself. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember. Home isn't a place you inherit, it's a love you protect.